awesome times. Now, on this issue of comfort, because this is normally when Christians are objecting to something I'm doing, you can normally trace it back to that.
Yes.
I'm making someone uncomfortable.
Hmm.
So what are your thoughts on this? And I think this connects to a recent video I saw of you when you were kind of talking about some things along this line. But go ahead.
It's basically what has happened is that the church has been gentrified. The church has been turned into a middle class bastion of middle class life. It's the it and it's also the echoes of the Enlightenment and the Enlightenment transformation of European civilization, which reduced the church to just something, or tried and failed to reduce the church to just something private and personal, a sort of personal piety that doesn't go public, that doesn't influence the public, and that the world should be guided by other concerns rather than spiritual concerns. And in the midst of all of that, um, Christianity became the affair of the affair of the middle classes, the reading classes, and not something that was part of the everyday life, increasingly, of many of the working classes. And I don't know about the middle class in America, but I can certainly speak for the middle class in England, because I've met many of them in church, weirdly enough. Um, but they will run a mile from anything that is controversial or conflictual, because they have nice lives.
Mm-hmm.
They have good jobs. They have bills to pay. And the idea of the spirituality of martyrdom and the spirituality of suffering, which is there in the scriptures, was taught by the church fathers, and upon which the church has been built for 2,000 years. Yeah. The missionaries that went out during the colonial period to evangelize, those people suffered disease, suffered persecution, deprivations in comfort to the nth degree, and many of them died. And many of our modern missionaries today they make great sacrifices. They deprive themselves for years of many of the comforts that we take for granted in the West, and some of them die. But yet the church in the West, whilst lauding and praising these missionaries that do these brave things abroad, and remembering, the martyrs of old, will run a mile before any of them think that that is something that we as Christians should live in the West.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem, is we have lost the spirituality of the cross in our churches. Now, we haven't lost the gospel. We know that Christ died on the cross to save us from our sins. I'm not talking about that. We've got the doctrine. What I'm talking about is we've lost the spirituality. What does it mean for you, David, to pick up your cross and carry it every day? What does it mean for you, viewer, to pick up your cross and carry it every day? This symbol of torture, this symbol of death. Christ calls you to die. That's what he says. He calls you to your death. He says that you should die and be born again. And when he calls you to embrace your cross and to suffer in his way. The way that he describes is one that is narrow and difficult and hard, that leads unto life. The way that leads unto death is broad and easy and short. Christ doesn't teach a theology of a comfy mattress is our God, but many of our churches do. We teach the sugar daddy in the sky kind of God. The God that's going to give you what you want, and he's going to bless you, and you're going to have a nice, happy family. We don't teach the crown of the martyr. We don't teach the blood of the saints. That this is the spirituality upon which the church has been built. And if you look at any Christian that has achieved anything in history, they did it through sacrifice. You know, John Wesley, who preached all over England, travelled thousands and thousands and thousands of miles on horseback whilst writing, amazingly, all these hymns. Like, do you think that that guy didn't suffer travelling all those thousands of miles on horseback? You know, do you not think that that caused him some troubles? Like, every Christian that's ever achieved anything has had to sacrifice to do it. And what we're teaching in our churches is that you can have victory without sacrifice. And that is not the way the world works. And it certainly isn't the way that the Christian spirituality of the apostolic teaching is. You know, Paul says that it is through sufferings that you will develop the character that is worthy of a saint. You know, that this suffering that develops the character of Christ. And yet we're teaching something entirely different in our churches. We're teaching, you know, you know, God will bless you. God will, you know, God doesn't want you to suffer. No, if you follow Christ, you're going to suffer. That's the reality. If you're following Christ, the world will resist you. And I would appeal to Christians that we need to get back to a spirituality that is cross-centered. You know, that we run the race, that we fight the good fight, that we train as athletes for the calling that we have, and that all of that involves sacrifice. There's no victory without sacrifice, and we cannot win any victory against secular pluralism, against secularism, against liberalism, against Marxism, or against Islam, or against you know, the nationalism, unless we are willing to sacrifice for the cause. That's my thought on that.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's you got two things. One,
yeah. Where do you go? Where do you go from that, David?
Yeah. Nowhere.
He just said, "Call us to die."
Yeah.
Where do you go from there?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. You know, we going back to what you're saying. I mean, you've got Jesus, and Jesus dies on the cross. But even after that, I mean, by the time the Apostle Paul was executed, pretty much his entire body would have been scar tissue.
Yeah, he was
right?
battered.
He would have been covered because of the lashes, the beatings, the stoning. A good portion of his body would have been scar tissue because of all the damage done to his body. And you've got sort of the two things with Christians today. Yeah, we look back at the martyrs and what they had to deal with. And yet today, anytime you're messing with people being comfortable, in other words, anytime you make them uncomfortable, that's a problem. And two, anytime you're kind of rocking the boat, drawing attention to something else, causing any problems, causing a commotion, that's a problem. That's a problem. I mean, gosh, Paul started riots wherever he went, wherever he went.
Exactly.
And we look at that and we say, great. But if you were to go somewhere, and your preaching were to cause a big uproar or something like that, there are lots of there are lots of Christians who would, I can't believe this. This is not Christ-like behavior causing all of this uproar and commotion. It's just interesting stuff.